This is a little different than I generally talk about on the show, but I feel like it's good to talk about parenting sometimes. And there was a mom who spent 10 years gentle parenting. Now, this is I assume, just so we're all clear, I don't do the gentle parenting, okay? Gentle parenting, I think, is when you generally, you like, yes, I understand that you're upset. Let me tell you something. These kids melt down all the time, Liz. They'll throw a tantrum. They'll tell you that, oh, this is the worst. Meanwhile, this is over like getting an eraser or something. It's something so stupid. And you gotta tell these kids who's in charge. It's the parent. This is where you say, oh, I understand that you're feeling this way, and I appreciate your emotions. I want you to feel those emotions. And if you feel like you need to get upset, you should get upset. You know what we do in my house? I'm like, if you want to get upset, go stand in the closet. I don't want to hear it. If you're crying, get out. Go. You got to have a parent in charge. This mom who did 10 years of this, now she says it was a huge mistake. She says her kids are anxious, insecure, and entitled. And by the way, I'm glad she is talking about this. She says, I can spot gentle parenting kids because I raised 2 of them. 10 years later, I'm having to undo it. She says, validating every emotion, processing their feelings extensively, explaining every boundary, compromising, and avoiding harsh punishments is what she did as a gentle parent. She said, I thought I was doing it right. Then my kids got older and I started to see the results real time. Liz, I could have told you this a long time ago. You know, you look at people of a certain generation, and for every generation, they're raised a certain way. There are boundaries, there are parameters. You don't cross those boundaries or you get punished for it. And guess what? It's how you learn, and it's how kids grow up with the understanding of what's expected of them in society and in real life. We've allowed these kids who, I mean, I guess a lot of them are kind of coming into like high school, college age now, to just kind of have free reign of whatever they want. And she said her kids are anxious, insecure, and entitled. Well, I bet they are. And the only people we have to blame for it are the parents, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is common sense. She said she can see it from a mile away. We can all see it. It's the kids that are complaining that their teacher or their boss won't call them by their preferred pronouns. That's all of these people who want to identify as they, them, or cats, or I don't even care what it is at this point. But I was raised by 2 immigrants, as I said, from the Soviet Union. There was no gentle parenting in my house. If you didn't like what we served for dinner, you didn't eat. If you didn't practice the violin, you didn't live at home. If you came home with a B, you had to retake the test or even the class. I mean, it was just common sense. You don't complain. If you want to complain, you get to hear stories about the Soviet Union, and you get to move out and live on your own and make it that way. That's just the way that it was. And now that I'm an adult, I realize that they did everything right, and I'm immensely grateful, super close with my parents, and hope to raise kids one day the exact same way. I don't know if gentle anything works, and I think that's kind of the problem in our country. People are so lucky to be Americans and be as privileged as all of us are here. We don't realize what goes on around the world, and that's why people actually want to argue 24/7 about preferred pronouns or God knows what else they come up with. And if you realize how hard people have it around the world, you'd know that none of this actually matters, and it's a parent's job to instill that in their kid, because otherwise, where do they learn everything? From their communist professors. So that's kind of your responsibility in life, and I'm just glad this woman is calling it out, because more people have to call out their own mistakes so people can learn from them.
Yeah, they always say, Alex, that if your kid thinks that you are their friend, you're doing it the wrong way. You should be their parent, not their friend. And I mean, I feel like there's a lot of like, you know, folks on the left who identify with this gentle parenting stuff and really like got into it. And I would assume that probably more conservative, parents are doing things maybe a more traditional way. But this is, I think so often about the greatest generation, as we always call it, the World War II era generation, where, you know, at 18 years old, these young men were literally storming the beaches of Normandy and willing to die, and did die, many of them, for our freedoms and for freedom around the world. And they didn't really have a choice in the matter. They had to go, they had to enlist, and they had to go serve overseas. And then you look at the same 18-year-olds today who need a puppy and a safe space because Donald Trump won the election. Like, what? Clearly something hasn't worked here. And I hope a lot more parents look at this and take it seriously, because we need to make sure that our kids are ready. One day they will take over this country. And we want to make sure that they're prepared for it. They're not anxious or whatever other things all of this craziness causes.
I can say, I have a 4-year-old, so my experience with motherhood is kids need routine and they need discipline. And I think that that's what this mother was hitting on. There's actually studies that show authoritative parenting over gentle parenting produces more successful children. And you can see it once you have the experience, especially during those toddler years where there's repercussions for your actions, that the children, they appreciate that. There's actually a need for that, I guess, to set limits, boundaries. And that's one of the things that I think is important for us to remember going forward with the next generation is, it shouldn't, we talk about parents, yes, parents, that's where it starts, but we also have to look at what's being taught, Elizabeth said, in schools, communist type of professors. That's the type that's telling us, no, you need to ask about feelings instead of saying, no, if you're going to act like that, if you're going to cry, I don't want to hear it. Come back to me if you're mad in those pants, you can just get glad. That's what I always tell my daughter. Because they need that. They don't need to be coddled, because that's the problem. That's going to produce the children that aren't going to be able to show up to work because they've had their feelings hurt. I remember when I was in law school, I don't know if it was the Obamacare ruling. I forget what it was. It was something about that where it suffered a blow. And one of the teachers in another law school had said students didn't have to show up because they were so upset. And my professor, I went to a Catholic law school, and they said, there's no judge that would tell you don't show up to defend your client because you were upset about something that happened in the news. Like, that's crazy. It's those types of parents and those types of professors that need to produce the better generation going forward. And hopefully we'll see changes. I hope we're moving away, to Elizabeth's point, some of these pronoun references. My mom was a school teacher for almost 50 years, and she said the last 3 before her retirement were just wild. The amount of students that came forward wanting to be referred to it as a certain pronoun. She's like, I would just tell them, I'm not doing that. I'll call you by your name. And there needs to be more teachers like that.
And I feel like the kids run the show a lot of times. And it's almost like you're dealing with terrorists. Like, the second they know that if you give them anything, don't make empty threats to these kids. You just tell them what's going to happen, and that's it. You have to follow through on it. Yeah, it's tough. Nobody wants to punish their kid, but sometimes they need a punishment. I will give you a great example. There's obviously a lot of talk about kids and cell phones and screen time, etc. We did very little screen time at my house, 15 minutes max a day if my kids had a good day. About 3 months ago, my son got in trouble, and we told him, like, if there's any problem, you're going to lose the iPad. He lost it for both my son and my daughter, because they're a team on this. For 2 weeks, they lost it. And my husband and I just looked at each other. After the first week, they were like, oh, we wish we had it. After the second week, they kind of forgot about it. And it was amazing because they were constantly reading after this. And my husband and I were like, we're just not going to give it back. We have not used that iPad in 3 months. And this is good news, because a recent study published by the journal Pediatrics found that those who had a cell phone before the age of 12 were more likely to develop depression, obesity, and poor sleep habits compared to those who didn't. I don't even know if 12 is old enough, quite frankly. My kids are going to be horrified to hear that. But Liz, this is all part of what I'm talking about. The parents out there who are like, oh, but they really want the cell phone. Yeah, they want the cell phone. Yeah, they want the iPad, because it stimulates like the dopamine receptors in their brain the same way that a drug would. To give it to these kids at such an early age, I get that it's easy, but just try saying no to your kids. Just turn it off. They will go outside. You know what my son does at night? He reads a book before he goes to bed. And I actually can't get him. I had to go in his room last night. It was like 10 o'clock and he was still reading his book. And I was like, dude, you got to put this book away. Now I have to take a book away from my son. It's amazing, but we need more of that, because if these kids are getting so used to like the hit and the high they get off of screens, then what is it that's going to excite them down the road? We don't really know, but I think studies like this make me as a parent very aware that I want little to no time in front of a screen, and I'm talking everywhere. My kids go out to dinner, guess what? They bring a ball and they figure out a game and they play with it. They bring something to color on. It's all, you just got to plan a little bit ahead, and I hope we start doing more of that, because I am very concerned about what this does lead to long term.
No, I agree. And also there's a lesson there too. I mean, my parents loved the whole life's not fair thing. I think I heard that maybe 8 times a day. But they also want the phone, not just because of the stimulation and everything on there. They want the phone because all their friends have a phone.
Oh,
and
yeah.
there was nothing I loved more than saying, but Katie has this, but Alexa has this. And my dad would love to look me in the eye and say, it sucks, life's not fair. A lot of people had a lot of things I never had. And that was it. And I learned a really hard lesson, and now I'm grateful for the things that I do have. So, hopefully they learn. But also when I was young, there was no Instagram and no Facebook and none of that on the phone. So I can only imagine how dangerous those phones are for kids right now. So hopefully they learn that life is unfair, and also stay away from all the nonsense on the internet that actually can cause serious problems that we do not have enough time to research yet, that are probably harming the next generation in more ways than we've actually realized.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.